Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining this new podcast where we will talk about brains. So, more specifically, we will talk about how physical activity professional can improve their clients' mental health. To talk about that, we have joined an expert. Hi, Jill.
Hi there. Great to be with you, Etienne.
Just for the people who don't know you, can you tell us a little bit more about your background?
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure. So, to share my background, I'm going to go way back because it started when I was young, getting onto this path. And that's because growing up, my parents owned and operated a sporting goods store. And not only did they own and operate it, we actually lived right behind it. So we were attached to the sporting goods store. So needless to say, myself and my two younger sisters would often be running around in the sports store, trying on sports clothes, playing with the equipment. So that impression started really young for us. And then as I grew up, I actually started to work there. So it was a part time job for me in high school. And the other part of this was that outside of the sporting goods store, we just played a lot of sports because my dad was the coach of many of our teams. So by the time I was in high school, I actually became the girls' athletic rep on the student council. I did that for several years. And it was just really a way of life. So that's the first part of my background. And then it led to how I got onto this career path, which I'd be happy to share at some point as well.
Wonderful. And normally at Xfit, for people that don't know us, I didn't present, it's a software for personal trainers and healthcare professional in general for managing their file, all of their client. And normally we are talking about fitness and health, where we'll talk about muscle, about exercises, about performance, about everything that we're normally talking. But today you are a brain fitness expert. And so I would like to understand a little bit of this background. How did you switch from normal, I will say, fitness to brain fitness?
That's a great question. And it's really interesting. It happened really naturally for me, actually. So I went to university initially with the plan to go in to become a school teacher. And I really enjoyed learning, and my teachers inspired me, and I wanted to make a difference that way. However, things happened that led me in a new direction. So, for starters, when I got to university, life was very busy with a full course load and studying. I was also a volunteer as a big sister. And I was busy making meals, doing laundry, all those things that my mom took care of when I lived at home. So now
Classic.
that I had, right, that my life was so full of just getting things done and getting to class
Yeah,
on time and
fully.
doing my homework and everything else, that I put fitness and exercise on hold. And for an extended enough period of time that I started to notice that something was off. I didn't have the same amount of energy. I couldn't focus as well. My mood wasn't as positive. I just didn't feel as in my zone or as good as I normally would feel. And so something just kind of clicked and said, I think you need to get out and get moving. So I got my bike out. I started jogging. I went to the fitness center, and Etienne, immediately I noticed a
Yeah.
difference. I mean, I started to take off that extra weight that I had been gaining, but I also had more energy and I
Yeah.
could focus, and my mood improved. And I just was like, I have to make time for this. I don't have time not to exercise because it doesn't just affect my physical body, it affects my emotions and my mind as
Yeah,
well. I
fully.
had a firsthand experience of seeing the difference on all levels. And that had a really big impact on me, to the point that after graduating with my BA, instead of going right into teachers college, I decided to take a year off and look at my options in the health and wellness industry. And because I was learning that was becoming my real interest and passion. And so what ended up happening is I discovered a field of work called educational kinesiology. And that actually, let's break that down for a second because
Yeah.
that leads to the brain fitness. Educational kinesiology means drawing out through movement. And That's because the word education comes from the Latin word educar or educare, and that literally means to draw out. And kinesiology is the science of movement
Moments,
and
yeah.
posture and the mechanics of movement. And so when you combine educational kinesiology, you get the whole understanding of learning and drawing out one's potential through the science of movement. And this field of work really spoke to me because it seemed to combine my interest in teaching and learning with that whole movement realm. And the cornerstone modality of educational kinesiology is called brain gym. And brain gym is about, as you might assume,
Friends,
brain
your brain.
gymnastics, taking your brain to the gym, and it's about using movement strategically to activate neural pathways that are for learning, for focus, for creativity, for calming, for all sorts of things, really, and to lay down neural pathways so we can move towards our goals. And these are not goals that are related necessarily to fitness goals. They're life goals. They're goals of other types of things we might want to achieve or change or improve in our life. And so I was fascinated by this because I already had a real belief in the power of movement and activity. And now this field of work was really packaging it in a way that made absolute sense to me. So I pursued my license in that work. I'm still licensed in brain gym and educational kinesiology to this day, decades later. And
Well,
I'm absolute fan of the work. And Dr. Dennison and his wife Gail are the founders of Brain Gym. And he's been a mentor of mine since I first learned about this work. And then what happened ultimately is because there's been so many breakthroughs in neuroscience and there are so many other modalities that are complementary to this, as I continued on my career path, I started learning and gaining more experience and putting it to use myself and with my clients, that I decided that I'd like to take the best of all these worlds and combine it to what I have created, which is my brain fitness programs. And that's how it happened.
wow. And we'll talk a little bit more about those programs, those courses you're offering. But so just I understand, you are licensed Brain Gym, which is something existing, and under this you have created your own courses. Is that right?
Yes. And so I've created my own brain fitness courses and ultimately trainers program because once again, neuroscience continues to expand
Yeah,
and
for sure.
grow. I
Yeah.
mean, we're always at that like frontier of that next discovery. And our brain is this incredible mechanism that we are understanding more and more about, and yet there's still so much more to learn.
Yeah.
So it's yeah, it was a way to incorporate more that's available today
Yeah.
and customize the training that I offer to the individual or the organization I work with.
Which is bringing me to my first question, but not my first. I'm already on my third, but just you are talking about training the brain, but I need to figure out, explain me what that means truly, because I can do Sudoku. This is the first thing coming to my mind,
Right.
but I'm sure we're not talking about that. And my brain
Right.
cannot do push up.
Let's break this down here.
Yeah.
So, what I really enjoy telling people is that you can use the body you currently have to get the brain you want.
Yeah.
And so there is no separation here. It's not like the neck up, the body down, two separate entities. It's one whole integrated system, right? And so whatever we do to any part of ourself affects the other parts. And what we can do here is use lifestyle habits and certain strategies and techniques that are very often physically based or body based to improve our brain, because this is not a brain surgery. This is about neuroplasticity. And so ultimately, what I like to do is, first of all, step one is awareness. awareness of this incredible mechanism, your brain. It's the most sophisticated, clever, and advanced technology on the planet. And so, we have to understand that we're working with this power, and then how do we care for it? How do we optimize it? And so, number one is knowing these 86 billion neurons are, the top neuron cells on the planet, and they can do their job well when we provide the right conditions. Okay, so that's the starting point, the awareness that we can change, the awareness of what we're working with. And then it leads to user-friendly neuroscience, because the neuroscience that's out there is often hard to translate into. It's happening more and more. It's becoming more mainstream. But I find the information in the laboratory compared to where that lands in our daily life, there still can be a disconnect for a lot of people. So it's like, how do we translate into daily lifestyle habits and actions that would support us? So the components of my brain fitness programs would include activities like neurobics. Now, people have heard of aerobics, which is cardiovascular training for the heart, circulatory system. Well, neurobics is for your neurovascular system. It's for your neurons. It's to activate your brain in a whole range of ways, because a lot of people are just living the same day over and over and over again, and they're not stimulating the majority of their brain potential. Yeah. So there's activities called neurobics. This is the conditioning for the brain. Then we do sensor sizes. Sensor sizes are activities to activate your sensory system. A lot of people are sitting still in front of their desk, whether it's in a classroom or in the workplace. Just a lot of issues with sedentary lifestyles. And so we need to activate the brain. And one of the best ways to do that, Etienne, is through the sensory system, because our senses are our gateway of our connection of relating to and interacting with the world. It's how we garner information that then goes through our nervous system into our brain. So we need to make sure that that information is flowing properly and freely. So there's a lot we can do there, and the various activities, making sure that cerebral spinal fluid is flowing, and making sure that we're not operating from a place of stress. We're operating from a place of whole brain connection. And then I have these movement activity cards that are part of my brain fitness programs as well. And they're full of all these different movement strategies that a person would do based on the type of outcome they want to achieve. So if they want to feel more confident, they can do this posture. If they want to be more focused, they can do this activity. Yeah. If they want to be more calm and centered, they do this activity, etc., etc. And then, so those are all movement based. I'll just throw in, just as we're wrapping up this part, is that there's also calming meditations. I call them brain spas, where we're also tuning in, calming our system, reflecting, visualizing, activities like that, which then leads to mindset training. And last but not least, brain body fuel, how to fuel ourselves so we're feeding our brain properly. Yeah.
I only have one word while you are talking and explaining me better what is your brain gym. It's holistic. So it's to train the body, the brain, to meditate for a better health in general. But what is for you the definition of holistic? Because it's clearly what we are talking about, no?
Yeah, it is. It's a holistic practice for sure. And ultimately, it's just stepping out of looking at just the physical, and understanding that,
just having biceps.
And when we do, well, right, because look, working on our flexibility and our strengthening endurance and things, and our appearance, even, that's all great. But ultimately, what's going on behind the scenes and driving so much of our life experience, our emotions, our emotional health, our mental health, our overall functionality, our self-management, and our spirituality. And that's different for each person, right, on how they might want to approach that. So, but the start is to look at all these components and respect that they're there, and know that they're a driving force behind the scenes. But the cool thing is, Etienne, when someone starts to engage in an exercise program, whether that's yoga or Zumba or CrossFit training or whatever it is, they're going to feel a difference emotionally and mentally as well. Just
Immediately.
getting out there moving is going to make
Yeah,
them, is going to
always.
benefit them holistically. What I do in my field of work is I really educate people in this, the science around it. I give them the awareness, and then I give them even more tools to really leverage and optimize it so they can discover their whole self and bring more of their potential to their life. I've got this expandable sphere, which people see if they're watching the video of this interview.
Yeah.
And I like to say that most often we're, functioning at this very stressed based mode. And with the awareness and the tools that I share, we can move into this whole brain state where we can access that higher order thinking, those executive functions. So we think more clearly, we make better decisions, we interact better, we communicate more effectively, we're more organized, we're more on our game. And I think that is the link that physical fitness practitioners, trainers can bring to their clients. And I think this is a really exciting opportunity because the world really needs this.
Yeah, clearly. And this is the link you are doing between so training the brain in a more holistic way and then having an impact on the mental health of your clients.
Exactly.
Mm.
Exactly. Inevitably, someone's going to feel more positive because you know what you're doing? You're activating those happy brain neurochemicals, the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin. You're starting to activate them in a variety of ways, and it empowers the person that they have control over their state of mind. They can do something. They can feel better, and it's a daily practice. It comes down to our lifestyle habits and choices,
Yeah.
but people have strategies they can work with outside of the gym because the types of things I share, a trainer can incorporate into their practice with their clients. And the
Yeah.
extra benefit is they can encourage their clients to take these activities with them into their daily life. So now their client is empowered to think, I'm constantly investing into myself. I know how to shift from stress to balance on demand. I am the person who gets to sculpt my brain, not just my
Yeah.
body, but my brain too.
Yeah. We are talking about holistic practices, and at the same time, you're also talking about yoga, meditation. I think you have said spirituality. Like, we're talking about a bunch of practices. And I can just ask myself, is holistic training always including those terms, those practices?
I think that's very individualized, really. I think it's a great question. I mean, I at the end of the day, I think that's where it becomes personal, and a person needs to find out what resonates with them. A person needs to be motivated, and they have to find like what is their goal, what is their need, what is their stress, and that's the customization side of this. But generally speaking, there's no doubt like our brains are designed to move in space. So, as an example, if we're just sitting still for too long, that's going to affect our functionality. It's going to affect our emotions. It's going to affect our mind. It's
Yeah.
going to affect us if we're just sitting around all the time. We're not activating our energy. We're not activating our brain. Our brain doesn't know that it's needed. Actually, it comes down to that saying, if you don't use it, you lose it. So, the other part of this too, which I would at some point really like to share with you, is really that when a person starts to engage in activities like brain fitness, they're starting to really leverage their superpower, which is neuroplasticity. And that is really, it's a cutting edge word that's become really popular. And yet people don't necessarily understand what that means and how it works. And that's a big part of the training I offer. And I'd be
Yeah.
happy to touch on that at
Yeah.
any point if you like.
For sure. Let's talk and dive into this maybe later, just to be sure we are not burning
Yeah.
steps and that everybody is following us. When I was looking to your courses and that we were preparing this podcast, you were talking about three main components for a better health. And we have not talked about them already. Can you give us a little bit more information about this?
Absolutely. First of all, once again, our brain is designed to move in space. We need to be active in movement, but a person needs to find what resonates with them when it comes to that. Because, just to do movement for the sake of movement, well, then I suggest get outside every day and go for a walk.
Yeah.
Go for a walk morning and night. 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes at night, that is a game changer. Research shows that when you start to get out and engage in movement, even as simple as walking, you grow the learning and memory centers of your brain. Not to mention, you change your environment, you're getting away from your screen, you're getting solar power from that wonderful sunshine. And the more movement that you get throughout the course of your day, the better you're going to sleep at night, because we need to, in a sense, tire ourselves out. And if we've been sitting all day, we
Yeah.
haven't expended enough energy. We haven't engaged. And so now we go to sleep and we're tossing and turning because the body isn't ready for sleep. So movement throughout the day is an investment, not only to your effectiveness throughout your day, but also your sleep at night. And quality of sleep is key because our brain is consolidating information, moving information from short-term memory to long-term memory. It's cleansing, it's healing, it's doing all these important things. So quality and quantity of sleep is key. And that's a whole topic we could go into, but to touch on it just now. And then, of course, focusing on nutrition. Absolutely. That brain body fuel aspect that I referred to before. We whatever we feed our body, we're feeding our brain.
Yeah.
And so what I like to tell people is that, first of all, just really focus on getting properly hydrated, because when you're dehydrated, you're putting stress on your brain, and it actually shrinks our brain size when we start to become dehydrated. But it also affects our ability to focus. It causes brain fog. We're not cleansing the same way. We're not moving energy or that electrical power.
Yeah.
So we really need to get hydro powered every day. And so I always have my water with me. I say, carry it with you, make it convenient.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's so much to be said on healthy food choices, taking out the bad stuff, putting in the good stuff, getting lots of fruits and vegetables, healthy proteins, healthy fats. I'm sure you've interviewed a nutritionist before. I could go into that, and that would be a very thorough conversation. But again, just knowing that we are
Yeah.
what we eat, and whatever we're feeding our body, we're feeding our brain. And if we're not eating healthy things, not only is it causing inflammation in our gut, it's causing inflammation in our brain. And this is very unhealthy currently, and
Yeah.
also can cause long-term issues.
You were talking about those three components, but do you not find that we are lacking in those three components, the emotional, like stress and motivation, and also maybe the social component at the end?
Yeah, well, the social is a big part of it. And I really think that once people start working out with a trainer, or they join a club, or they go to a class, that might be the biggest helpful benefit that they would get, is that being around others, that social component. We aren't meant to go alone. We all have different strengths. We all have different abilities and different interests. And so we know that the more people we have, to coming together to work on a project, for
Yeah.
example, the better it will be. There are times when we need to be on our own. Going into meditation, having our alone time, I'm really a proponent of. I think that's really key. People need to unplug and just be with their own company. And I think over the past few years, we really became disconnected. There was a lot of isolation, and that really affects our happy brain neurochemicals. And then what happened too, Etienne, is people started using their devices more. They started getting on their computers more, on their phones more, on their different devices. Technology started to replace people to a certain degree. And so it's great. We can communicate in this fantastic interview using technology. I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And it still can't replace going out there and seeing people, visiting with your friends and your neighbors, and being part of things.
Yeah. Yeah, physically. And will you say that there's other components? So we have said 5, but is there others?
Yeah, you know what? Again, like, everyone's lives are so unique, but I'd like to say that there's been a study done on the blue zones around the world. There's 7 of them, and these are territories where it's the longest lived cultures, the cultures that live have the number of centenarians, people who live to be beyond 100 years old. And so it's fascinating to study that type of culture to find out what are these main components to live healthfully and holistically. What is it that they do? And a big part of it is getting outside, being active. They're not sitting
Yeah.
around, they're farming, they're carrying stuff. They don't have all these motorized vehicles necessarily. They don't, they're in areas where they walk and to do things. And they're not always walking on paved sidewalks either. The more rugged the ground is that you walk on, the better it is for your brain, because your brain is getting more of a workout. These simple things add up over time. These blue zone regions, that's their diet too. It's their access. They're living in very areas that have very mineralized soils. So along with the fuel, Etienne, I will add in that I'm a big fan of supplementing,
Yeah.
and I've been taking a certain supplement program for, gosh, a decade and a half now. And I'm a huge fan of getting all my vitamins, minerals, amino acids, essential fatty acids, and antioxidants and extra things, because it's hard in North America to rely on our daily diet for everything.
Yeah.
So that's another part of the information I like to share with people. But yeah, once again, these blue zones, they have great relationships with their community. They have their spirituality. They're it's a very inclusive type of feeling in these cultures, and it pays off because once again, they live healthfully well into their later years, and the number of people who live to be beyond 100 is significant, and so they're worth learning about, and they're worth following their lead.
Yeah, for sure. And this subject is huge. Like you were talking about neuroplasticity. Maybe you can tell us just a bit about it, just so we understand how many and how big is the subject.
Yeah, well, the reason why all these things that we've mentioned actually work is because of neuroplasticity. I mean, if we were like born with a certain brain intact and you could never change it, then it would never matter what you do to improve it. But because we can change our brain, that is always available to us. We can change our habits, which will change our brain and change our results. So let's talk about that word for a moment. Neuroplasticity refers to your malleable, changeable, modifiable brain. So your brain's obviously not made of plastic, but it's plasticine like. And that's where that word came from. And that word has only been around for a few decades. It's a fairly new word in our vocabulary, because prior to this word being discovered, this ability being discovered, they didn't have a word to describe it. They thought, the brain is kind of set in stone. If you have an injury or a trauma or an IQ level or certain behaviors, you're kind of stuck. Thankfully, with this breakthrough in science, we realized that you can change your brain, and it is malleable and modifiable throughout our entire lifespan. In fact, there's something called neurogenesis. That's our ability to create new neurons. And that's available our entire lifespan as well. In certain regions, as we get older, it's not as quick, it's not
Yeah.
as abundant, only in certain regions, but it still exists.
Yeah.
And then the third part is synaptogenesis, which is our ability to create new links between neurons. Because just like we as people need to work with other people to feel safe and to get things done and to function well, our neurons have to exist in networks as well. That's how they share communication and relay information to create actions. So you've got neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, and synaptogenesis. And this is how we can constantly sculpt our own brain map. And it's exciting because daily habits will add up over time. And it's amazing what people can do once they have a few tools and strategies.
Yeah. And I think so. My idea was really just we have a 1 hour podcast. Honestly, we cannot cover everything we will like for you, everybody at home, to understand 100% of the subject. Like, Jill, you are in this field since more than a decade, you said. So what we want here is just so you understand the impact, understand the context, understand some concepts, but then for sure you will need to train yourself, train your brain at the same time. And so you are offering multiple courses about this subject. We have talked a bit about them at the beginning, and if everybody listening to us, you want to know more about those courses, they will be in the description somewhere, of depending on the platform where you're listening to this audio. Maybe, Jill, do you want to tell a little thing about those courses?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So they're on my website, and I would
Yeah.
really recommend people. There's a few things here. Go to my website, jillhewlett.com. And first of all, if you're interested in this topic, there's a lot of free resources right there. And you can get my downloadable brain guide, access to my weekly brain and life reset that goes out. It's a weekly Monday morning neuroscience tip that's got, strategies that you can implement. And then there's my blog, which is free, lots of articles there. And then if you go to the courses page, you'll find that I have one course, for example, is dedicated to these brain fitness activities, these cards here that I mentioned. And it's full of dozens and dozens of brain training activities. And oftentimes we're using our body to activate our brain. There's a little hint there on how that's done. And then, there's one for happiness and emotional balance, where we're really looking at those happy brain neurochemicals and how to really become empowered over our own joy and not wait for certain things to happen before we feel happy, that we can actually activate that right here and now. That's the type of focus we put there. There's another one for active aging and cognitive longevity. So, we refer to those blue zones, but it's also what can we do in our daily life right now to preserve our cognitive functioning, strengthen it, and kind of invest into that long-term cognitive reserve that it truly is an investment, Etienne. It's people,
Yeah,
you can't just hope for the best. You got to, just like people invest into their money in their bank account, they have to invest into their brain reserve as well.
for
And
sure.
so those are some examples of some of the courses. There's a lot more. And as well as I have some products, the brain fitness cards and my books.
Okay. And so everybody, let go see all of that on your website. As I said, the link will be in description somewhere, depending on which platform you are. Maybe if we want to wrap up everything we're saying, what will be your piece of advice for the professional listening to us? What will be, how can you help them to put it in place tomorrow?
Well, I suggest people start with themselves. Once you have the awareness and you really do believe in this body mind connection, because that's what it is, our brain is neurologically wired through our whole body. You move your body, you activate your brain. Once you realize that that is a real thing and you want to leverage that, then you can, once again, contact me. I'd be happy to discuss more. There's lots of resources. But it's then, once again, apply it yourself, because it's hard to teach something if you don't understand it. So start to apply it, be a role model, lead by example, and then introduce this gradually, this user-friendly neuroscience into your sessions with your clients, because what I find is people find this very interesting. They actually become fascinated by it. And so you can give them little tips and tricks that don't just help them sculpt their body, but also their brain and their life, because this is something they can take into their daily lives. Then they will really appreciate it. You'll have more satisfied clients and you'll have greater retention.
Yeah.
So I think it's just really a win-win-win, but start with yourself and then incorporate bits and pieces as you feel comfortable. And there are so many ways and things like you and I talked about where people can learn more about and start to incorporate.
Yeah. And that will be maybe a little caution I will say is if you are not fully qualified to answer to a question, for sure it can be dangerous for the client. So better not answering and referring your clients to the right professional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You always, I mean, this is
It's
in the
always.
scope of your capacity. If
Yeah.
something is over your head, if something you're not qualified for, then you need to point people in the right direction. And that's why I have brain fitness training programs so
Yeah.
that people can become equipped in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
proper way
Yeah.
to deliver this information. And that's why I suggest them really understanding it themselves
Yeah,
first.
fully. And little publicity moment, but in Xfit, you can just share the file of your clients with somebody that is more expert on this specific subject, so you can work all together into the same client file. Something else that we are working always with Xfit is we are thinking about goals and sub goals like daily task, some stuff like that, and so you are able to create those goals or create those tasks and to see the completion rate, to see the client can complete it, can see if he did it, everything. What will be the kind of goals or tasks you will give to train the brain?
Well, once again, I'd start small.
Yeah.
The thing is, you want people to be successful and you don't want to overwhelm them. An overwhelmed brain will just go into stress and it will shut down. So, as with anything, it's making gradual progress bit by bit. So, any change needs to be sustainable so that they can do it consistently over time to actually build that new neural pathway and make it stronger and lay down that myelination, which is going to allow that neural pathway to become faster and stronger. And so I really recommend for something as simple as if their client is not drinking enough water, that's not a habit to just have at the gym. That's something to do in daily life.
Yeah.
And so as simple as that is, that can be transformative because when our system's is dehydrated, we're in a stress response. And like I said, your brain literally shrinks and you can't think clearly. So that is a simple example of making a little change. Maybe there can be simple dietary changes, taking out refined sugar, taking out gluten, pack
Yeah.
processed food or fast food. It can be as simple as that, but make it sustainable. And then coming to these brain fitness activities, if it's some of the activities from the brain fitness cards or the sensor sizes or neurobics that you'd learn through brain fitness, then you can start to every morning when you wake up, don't just assume that you're like wide awake and ready to go. Make sure your brain's turned on first and do some of these activities.
Yeah.
And then in the middle of your day, give your brain a little break and do some activities then. Right. Take a break from your screen and your desk.
Yeah.
Or Etienne, in the evening, so you can wind down and get ready to eventually go into a more relaxed state that's more conducive for sleep, because a lot of people are living in one speed all day long
Yeah.
and then they crash at the end of the day. It's like get up and go 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 go, and that's not like our brain and our heart occur in rhythms.
Yeah.
And we need to be more rhythmic and we need to pause and we need to tweak and adjust. I think a key thing though from our conversation that people are going to walk away with is the awareness on things that they might not have considered before. And that's really where it starts.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jill. Really, thanks for this wonderful discussion. Maybe just before we stop this podcast, what is like, do you have any resources other than the courses that people that are listening to us can read, can watch, can see, or anything?
Well, I'm going to put you at your edge of your seat here, and I'm going to leave everyone with a kind of like what's the word? Anticipation, because I have a special project on the go, and I
Oh,
really recommend people get in touch with me and stay in touch because they're gonna hear about it soon, where it incorporates so much of what we said into a format that is accessible, and it's a new offering that's going to be coming out in the fall, and I'm excited because it incorporates resources like what we said, and it really explains the neurology and the biochemistry in this conversation, because I think there's people that are very left-brained, very scientific based, that they're like, I want to understand how this works and why this works. So everything that you and I just discussed is going to be
In this.
addressed in even more detail
Yeah.
in this special project. And of course, in the meantime, on my website, there's already a lot of great stuff. And I invite people to connect on social media as well
Wow.
to get regular reminders.
Yeah, wow. So we stay in touch. Do you have any newsletter we can subscribe to?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
wonderful.
absolutely. And
So on your website.
please go for that, because that is another way of staying in that regular
Yeah,
communication. And that sign
wonderful.
up is on my
So
website.
social media, email, your website, newsletter. There's a bunch of ways of staying connected to you, and it's a good idea to stay because we are in October getting something new that clearly we want to have access right now. After all of this discussion. Thanks a lot, Jill, for having joined us today. Thanks for sharing everything you were able to share in the lapse of time that we were having. But thanks, it's really appreciated. And as everybody knows that are already listening to our podcast, you all know that if you are communicating with Jill, she will answer. And we are only inviting people that really want to share more information with you if you want to get deeper in the subject. So again, thanks everybody for joining. Thanks, Jill. And we will maybe do another podcast on this subject. Maybe we can dive deeper if it was a subject that have interest you all.
Sounds great. Thank you, Etienne.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.